Uh, you're talking a lot about choice. Could you go more into that, like when you're talking about how we're not choosing? Because I remember you mentioned that before.
Yeah, our life is normally run by habits.
Okay.
And it's only to the extent that you are conscious of your habits and can consciously change your habits that you have any choice.
Okay.
And most people don't. Most people live their lives with very little choice in anything important. That, am I going to have hot tea or iced tea? Minor things they will choose. Even that is mostly habit. But this is what Gurdjieff meant, and I don't like Gurdjieff's approach because it was almost totally left out love. It was all focused on will, which is simply desire, long-range desire. But choice means you see there are alternatives that are meaningful, not just little tiny unimportant things, and you can choose to do something other than you normally do from habit. And most people don't do that very much.
Okay.
So that's why astrologers, if they know the person's past pattern, they can then be fairly deterministic in their predictions, because they will go on doing what they did before.
So how would you see that? Like, mostly like the water and the moon factors, but it can also be Mars, which
the whole chart is part of it.
Right.
But the hardest thing to change is the fire and the water, because it's always carries this emotional intensity with it.
Oh, I see.
But you've got to remember that the planets are the most important, the houses are next, and the signs are last. So too many people just look at signs. I'm working with a client now that just moved down to this area, and her chart is loaded with air signs in water houses. She doesn't act like air at all, except she does talk all the time. But she's totally driven by her emotions and nuts. She just acts on her emotions like, I should be able to do this, because this is what I think is right, and so I should be able to do this. And constantly gets herself into trouble. Crisis after crisis after crisis, which is not typical of air. Air's rational and objective and logical.
You mean she's a air
sign? It is
sign,
typical of water. Sun is in an air sign, and she's got half her chart in air signs, but they're in water houses.
Oh.
And she's more dominated by the water than the air.
That's interesting.
Except for talking a lot. She thinks and
talks.
That
would be more like a fire-water combination of some sort.
No, air and water.
Okay.
It's air signs and water. So she shows the air by being very bright and very versatile, and all over the map. She's got degrees, and she's done all kinds of different jobs, and she's potentially extremely bright and competent, and so scattered, so diffused all over the map, and so nuts in terms of being practical, that I just look at what she does in marvel. Her latest escapade, she was in the middle of a health crisis, and she's been going to the Catholic Church. She was raised Catholic, and she's very much into New Age stuff, but the Catholic is a comfort to her. She goes to Mass. And so the priest that day chooses to put down Buddhism, just to go and start a big argument with the priest. And she was looking to have the possibility of a part-time job with the church. So she cuts her own throat by telling him he's not doing justice to Buddhism, he should read Buddhism, and Buddhism really is good. And
So again, this is a matter of there's really no choice here, unless she becomes aware through it like a chart reading.
She is habitually doing this kind of self-defeating behavior and has been doing it all her life.
So what would you recommend?
Thinking before she acts and saying, is this practical? What's going to be the consequences if I do this? Are those consequences that I want?
Then you would almost rather sort of, again, this seems like a fire act principle, or being spontaneous.
Uh-huh.
You see, water doesn't tend to be spontaneous, whereas fire does.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just wondering where this belief or this value in spontaneity and just expressing your mind so quickly like that.
It comes out in her case. Well, she's got Mars and Uranus conjunct. Exact.
Okay. All right.
And Vesta's in there too. So that just adds more intensity.
Right.
I know what's right, and they're all in the 12th house. I know what's right. I know what God wants. I know the truth. And I'm going to do that. I'm going to make the world conform to my beliefs of how it ought to be. And that's a lifetime conjunction of Mars, Uranus, and Vesta, almost lifetime, many, many, many years by progression. And she was living up in Northern California, It squared her midheaven. Exact. And she very nearly died. And I think if she'd stayed there, she probably would be dead by now. Yeah. She's not sane in terms of being practical. But I told her to leave. I'm not usually deterministic, but I said in this case, you need to leave that area. So she came down here.
She had a rather adverse local chart.
Yes, that conjunction of Uranus, Mars, Vesta was exactly square the midheaven where she was
Okay.
living.
It's a little heavy-handed. If you can handle that energy, that
Yeah.
is.
She also has Saturn on the ascendant, along with Ceres. She had brutal, abusive parents, both of them. And she's had a very difficult life. She's just tremendously bright and tremendously idealistic and spacey. And it's the loaded 12th house. Half her chart's in the 12th house. That's a major key to that. It's like Pisces. And she's got this vision of how she personally should do whatever to save the world.
So if she becomes more aware, whether through astrology or whatever,
Yeah.
of her chart, then she can get past that
Yeah,
habitual
when her
beliefs.
impulse is to say, I gotta go be savior. I gotta tell this Catholic priest that he's maligning Buddhism and that's not right, and Buddhism really is a nice, positive faith. You should investigate it and read it. And say, is that my business to convert a Catholic priest?
It's, like you were talking about, Linda Tripp is a professional moralist.
Exactly.
Right.
And also Ken Starr. And this woman is another one.
Yeah, but there's room for all of these.
Absolutely. But the thing is, whatever you do has a cost. The cost for this woman has been a life of constant uproar, crises, and catastrophes.
Well,
The cost of Linda Tripp has been alienating most of her friends.
Well, I guess it's consequences. You have to
That's
think
exactly
ahead.
right. The cost is the consequences.
You think ahead.
If you think ahead and say, if I do this, this is what's likely to happen. Do I want that? Do I want to do this enough to accept those consequences? If you do, then you do it, and take the consequences.
It's like people being a whistleblower. I know the consequences of
Exactly.
that, but is it that
Exactly.
important to do it?
Yes.
To be a Ralph Nader.
Exactly. And if you're willing to pay the consequences, you can consciously choose to go on doing whatever it is you've been doing and keep on doing it and get the consequences. If you decide you just as soon not be a martyr, you're tired of that role, you can make an effort to change. But changing habits is not easy. Most people go on doing what they're accustomed to doing.
So then you would recommend, since it's still a part of her nature, then she could either compromise or take turns with that
No, she has to
tendency?
do something Piscean. Her chart is so loaded with Pisces. And the positive thing she does with it is she's a singer, she's an actress, she's a musician, I think, besides singing. She works with kids. And the positive thing to do it is go on doing those positive Piscean things with beauty and idealism that aren't going to get her into problems. And the thing is, her emotional intensity is so great that she makes herself sick with it.
Okay, I was just really wondering about this whole thing about choice. You know, there's a lot of this metaphysical jargon is really into free will and
Yeah, but
choices and all this. You know.
you know,
so-
what I say is, to the extent you can change your habits, you have choice.
Okay.
You have no choice when it comes to making someone else different. And there are events which are scheduled from what's been done in the past that are too late to change. And your only choice in those cases is to change your attitude and how you experience them.
So let's put it in a different framework. If you've come in, let's say, with a Mars-Uranus square,
Yeah, let's say she's come in with this and she comes to abusive parents.
okay. So
Which-
therefore, could you, with awareness and working on it, in a sense, change it to a Mars-Uranus trine? It's still part of your nature.
No, you don't change it to a trine.
No, I mean,
You just-
you're
you
being more
just
constructive with
Use
it.
it more in more practical ways.
Right. But that's what I
Instead of-
mean,
Instead of
theoretically.
this blind utopian compulsion that she's got.
Okay. No, just as a conceptual concept. If you
No,
came in
you
with a
just say,
struggle.
I have the tendency with a Mars-Uranus conjunction to think I should be able to do what I want to do. And how am I going to handle that? You have to find something that you want to do that you can do that's not going to get you in trouble. You can't just stop doing, then you really get sick. You have to find something you can do that is constructive, that gets consequences you want. I have another friend who was born close to the same time as this woman with that same combination, but she has handled it and worked it out pretty well. She was working as a dental assistant, as a dental technician, and when that would get triggered, instead of getting sick herself, which this other woman does that's here locally now, the equipment around her would blow. And periodically the dental equipment, and she was enough into astrology, she could see, like this woman just went through Mars square, that Mars-Uranus combination. So it would have been on the fourth house cusp, where she'd still been in the north. And so this other woman, when she would get that pattern, some major piece of equipment in the dentist's office would blow a fuse or stop functioning, and they'd have to call the repair people, and the repairman would come and say, I can't understand this, there was nothing wrong with this, I don't know why it would do this, and he'd fix it. And after this went on for some few years, she just said, no, this is just not good, and she quit doing that job. She went back to school. She was able to get some help from her mother, and she went back to school and became a social worker, and now she's doing her spiritual, idealistic, utopian, help the world stuff in a very constructive way.
Okay. So she had to become aware of that. What she was doing
That's
was putting
right.
bread on the table, but...
Yes, every time that was triggered and said, I want to do something else. I want to do what I want to do, and I have to do this job to make a living.
Right.
And I don't like it.
I
And
see.
then the equipment would go.
Cool.
Very interesting. Well, I've actually sat at my machine when I had too much work.
Yeah,
Got so upset the machine would,
that's right.
because I just was overwhelmed. I
Yeah.
just couldn't stand all this work.
Yeah, it happened to me the other night. Someone called who takes a lot of my time on the phone sometimes, and I was in the middle of doing something and I didn't want to talk to her, and the phone quit. The phone blew its innards and was making loud screeching noises. Got me out of it.
Wow.
And after that it worked again.
Yeah. I bet you had a big smile
I
after
laughed.
that.
I had another client that was a similar case. She had really strong, I think it was Mars-Uranus in her case too. And she called me one day. She had made an appointment to come see me, and she called in some embarrassment and said, I'm going to have to cancel and see you later. My car caught on fire sitting in the garage. Nobody there, just sitting in the garage. The engine caught on fire. And I said, what is it you're angry about? And she said, well, I am angry. My mother is coming to live with me, and I don't want her, but I can't say no. And so I explained that, the car's her possession, and
the
instead
car
of
would be
taking
there
it out
to
on
pick up
herself,
her mother.
her anger hit the car.
Right.
And then she told me later another story that happened. She had a grown son who was into drugs, and she was obviously very upset about this. He came to visit her one night, and she got more and more angry at him, and finally she just screamed at him, just, get out of here, I never want to see you again. And some rags in a drawer in the kitchen burst into flames, spontaneous combustion.
I'm glad you don't have that power now, because I think some rags would be exploding around me.
Kathy says
So we can't just wave a wand and change our nature. If we have an intense emotional nature, we have to just gradually change the habits to become more laid back, to develop a sense of humor about it, to say, what can I do with this energy that's creative and constructive?
That's very interesting. Well, see, those tapes that I